The man who became the greatest investor of all time once admitted he wished he'd started earlier, not with stocks, not with companies, with understanding what money actually means when you're no longer young. Warren Buffett turned 60 in August of 1990. By then, he was already a billionaire many times over. Berkshire Hathaway had become a machine of compounding wealth. The world knew his name. Students studied his letters. Investors quoted his wisdom like scripture. And yet, if you read between the lines of everything he's said since, you notice something unexpected, a quiet acknowledgement that the rules change, that wealth without wisdom is just numbers on a page, that the game you play at 60 is not the game you played at 30. This is not investment advice. This is not a recommendation to buy or sell any security. This is a reflection on the philosophy of a man who spent his life thinking about money and what it should mean when time becomes more valuable than wealth itself. What if everything you learned about building wealth needs to be unlearned when it comes time to live on it? Warren Buffett grew up during the Great Depression. His father was a stockbroker who eventually became a congressman. Young Warren sold chewing gum door to door. He delivered newspapers before dawn. He bought his first stock at age 11. By 14, he'd saved enough to buy 40 acres of farmland in Nebraska. The compounding had already begun. But here's what people forget. The skills that make you wealthy are not the same skills that make you peaceful. The discipline that builds a fortune can calcify into stubbornness. The frugality that protects capital can become an inability to enjoy the life you've earned. And the confidence that allowed you to bet big when you were young can turn dangerous when you no longer have the time to recover from mistakes. By 60, Buffett had learned something that most people never grasp until it's too late. The purpose of money shifts. It has to. When you're building wealth, money is a tool for creating more money. The game is accumulation, growth, expansion. You measure success in percentages and portfolio values and net worth statements. But when you reach the age where you're no longer working for money, when the paychecks stop and the portfolio has to support the life you've built, the game changes completely. Money becomes a source of sustenance, of security, of peace. And if you're not careful, it can become a source of fear. Here's the truth most financial advisors won't tell you. By the time you're 60, the margin for error is gone. A 30-year-old who loses half their portfolio in a market crash has decades to recover. Time is the ultimate healer of financial wounds. But at 60, at 65, at 70, time is no longer your ally. Time is the opponent. And every decision you make with your money has to account for that reality. Warren Buffett understood this in a way that separated him from almost every other investor of his generation. He never stopped thinking about risk, not the risk of losing money in a bad investment, though that mattered, but the deeper risk, the risk of needing money you don't have, the risk of outliving your resources, the risk of becoming dependent on others, the risk of losing the freedom that money is supposed to provide. He once said that the first rule of investing is never lose money, and the second rule is never forget the first rule. People laugh when they hear that. They think it's clever wordplay. But it's not. It's deadly serious, because once you're retired, once you're living on what you've saved, every dollar you lose is a dollar that can never be earned back. You can't work another year to make it up. You can't take on a second job. You can't grind harder. The well doesn't refill. Survival beats brilliance. That's a lesson Buffett learned early and never forgot. He watched fortunes disappear in the market crashes of the 1970s. He saw investors who were geniuses on paper get wiped out because they were leveraged, or impatient, or arrogant. He learned that staying at the game matters more than hitting home runs, that protecting capital is more important than maximizing returns, that boring and steady will always outlast exciting and reckless. But here's where it gets interesting. Even Warren Buffett, the man who preached patience and simplicity and long-term thinking, admits there were things he didn't fully understand until later in life. Things about retirement planning that no amount of financial success can teach you until you're actually facing the reality of it. The first thing he wished he'd known? That retirement isn't about having enough money, it's about having the right kind of money. Let me explain. When you're building wealth, you can afford to be aggressive. You can take concentrated positions. You can ride out volatility. You can hold stocks that don't pay dividends because you're betting on long-term growth. You can weather the storms because you know the sun will eventually come out. But when you're retired, when you need that money to pay for your life, the equation changes. You need income, reliable income. Income you can count on even when the market is falling. Income that arrives every month or every quarter without you having to sell anything. Because the worst thing you can do in retirement is be forced to sell stocks in a downturn. That's when the math of compounding works against you instead of for you. You're selling low, you're locking in losses, and you're reducing the base of capital that can recover when the market eventually turns. Buffett built Berkshire Hathaway around this principle. He bought businesses that generated cash. Lots of cash. Predictable cash. Cash he could redeploy without ever having to sell anything. He loved insurance companies because they collected premiums up front and paid claims later, giving him float to invest. He loved simple businesses with strong competitive advantages. Businesses that didn't need much capital to grow. Businesses that could keep printing money year after year. That's the model for retirement, not high-flying tech stocks that might triple or might crash, not speculative investments that require you to time the market perfectly, but simple, durable sources of income that keep working even when you're not. Dividends, bonds, rental income, annuities, Social Security, pensions if you're lucky enough to have one, the kind of money that arrives whether the market is up or down, whether the economy is booming or stumbling, whether you're feeling good or sitting in a hospital bed. The second thing Buffett wished he'd known, that the enemy in retirement isn't the market. It's your own emotions. This is where most people fail. Not because they pick bad investments, not because they don't have enough saved, but because they panic. They see their portfolio drop 20% and they sell everything. They watch their neighbor brag about some hot stock and they chase it. They get bored with their plan and start tinkering. They read the news and convince themselves this time is different. Fear and greed don't retire just because you do. Buffett has spent his entire career preaching discipline. Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. Ignore the noise. Stick to your principles. Don't let the market's mood swings dictate your behavior. It sounds simple. It's not. Because when you're retired, the stakes feel different. When you were working, a bad year in the market was annoying, but you knew you had time. You knew you could keep contributing to your 401k. You knew your salary would cover your bills. But in retirement, every downturn feels existential. Every loss feels permanent. The fear is real and visceral and hard to ignore. Buffett watched this play out over and over. He saw retirees sell at the bottom of the 2008 financial crisis and miss the entire recovery. He saw people abandon their strategies after a few bad years and jump into whatever was working at the moment, only to watch that strategy fail too. He saw smart people, disciplined people, successful people make terrible decisions because they couldn't control their emotions. And here's what he learned. The best defense against your own emotions is a plan you can stick to no matter what. Not a complicated plan. Not a plan that requires you to be smarter than the market. But a simple plan that works in good times and bad times. A plan that lets you sleep at night. A plan that doesn't require you to predict what happens next. For most retirees, that means three things. Own enough safe assets that you never have to sell stocks in a downturn. Keep 2 or 3 or even 5 years of living expenses in cash or short-term bonds. Money you can spend while you wait for the market to recover. Money that lets you ignore the noise. Own stocks for growth, but not so many that you're terrified when they fall. Maybe 60% stocks in your 60s, maybe 50% in your 70s, maybe 40% in your 80s. Enough to keep up with inflation and leave something behind, but not so much that a bear market ruins your life. And never, ever, ever use leverage. No margin, no borrowed money, no bets you can't afford to lose, because leverage is what turns bad years into catastrophes. Leverage is what forces you to sell at the worst possible time. Leverage is the enemy of the retiree. Avoid debt. Avoid drama. Avoid dumb risks. That's the Buffett philosophy in 9 words. The third thing he wished he'd known? That retirement planning isn't about maximizing your portfolio. It's about minimizing regret. This is subtle, but it's everything. There's a certain kind of retiree who treats their portfolio like a scorecard. They check it every day. They compare the returns to the S&P 500. They brag when they're winning and sulk when they're not. They're obsessed with optimization, with getting every last percentage point of return, with proving they're smarter than the market. And they're miserable, because the math of retirement isn't about beating the market. It's about having enough. And once you have enough, the only thing that matters is not screwing it up. Buffett tells a story about a friend who was worth tens of millions of dollars, more money than he could ever spend, more money than his kids could ever spend. But he was always stressed about his portfolio, always worried he wasn't maximizing returns, always second-guessing his allocation, always wondering if he should be doing something different. One day, Buffett asked him a simple question. What's the goal? What are you trying to achieve that you haven't already achieved? The friend didn't have an answer. That's the trap. Once you have enough, more doesn't make you happier, more doesn't make you more secure, more just gives you more to worry about. Buffett learned to think about money differently, not as a scorecard, but as a tool for freedom. Freedom to spend time with people you love. Freedom to work on projects that matter to you. Freedom to not worry about money. The goal isn't to die with the biggest portfolio. The goal is to live well and sleep well, and leave something behind if you can. That means knowing your number. How much do you need to spend each year to live the life you want? Not the life you think you should want. Not the life your neighbor is living, but your life. Your actual, real, honest-to-God life. And once you know that number, you can build a plan around it. You can figure out how much you need in safe assets, how much you can afford to keep in stocks, how much you can withdraw each year without running out. And then you can stop worrying about everything else. The fourth lesson Buffett wished he'd learned earlier, that simplicity is a competitive advantage. This is counterintuitive. Most people think that sophisticated investors use sophisticated strategies, that wealthy people have access to secret investments the rest of us don't know about, that you need a team of advisors and a complex plan to succeed in retirement. Buffett learned the opposite. Complexity is the enemy. Complexity creates fees. Complexity creates confusion. Complexity creates opportunities to make mistakes. And in retirement, mistakes are expensive. He built his fortune on simple ideas. Buy great businesses at fair prices. Hold them forever. Don't sell just because the price went up. Don't sell just because the price went down. Ignore the noise. Focus on the fundamentals. Let compounding do the work. That philosophy works just as well in retirement. Own low-cost index funds. Rebalance once a year. Don't try to time the market. Don't chase performance. Don't pay someone 2% of your assets to pick stocks that won't beat the index anyway. Just own the market, own some bonds, and let time do its thing. Buffett has said repeatedly that for most people, including most wealthy people, a simple portfolio of index funds is the best solution. Not because it's exciting, not because it will make you rich overnight, but because it works, because it's easy to understand, because you can stick with it when things get hard, because it doesn't require you to be smart or lucky or perfectly disciplined. It just requires you to not screw it up. And here's the secret nobody tells you. Not screwing it up is 90% of the game. The fifth thing Buffett wished he'd understood sooner, that the biggest risk in retirement isn't running out of money. It's running out of purpose. This one surprised him. He spent his entire life thinking about money, building it, protecting it, growing it, understanding it, teaching others about it. Money was his purpose, his passion, his craft. So he assumed that if he could help people get the money part right, they'd be fine. But he watched too many people retire with plenty of money and fall apart anyway. They got depressed. They got sick. They aged faster than they should have because they didn't know what to do with themselves. They'd spent 40 years defining themselves by their work, by their productivity, by their role in the world, and when that was gone, they were lost. Money can't fix that. No amount of portfolio optimization or tax strategy or estate planning can give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. That has to come from something else, from relationships, from hobbies, from projects, from service, from meaning. Buffett never really retired. He kept working because he loved the work, because it gave him purpose, because he couldn't imagine doing anything else. But he's also said that he wouldn't want everyone to follow his path, that most people should retire when they're ready, that there's nothing wrong with stepping away from work if you've earned it. But you have to step towards something, not just away from something. That's the key. Retirement isn't the end of your productive life. It's the beginning of a different kind of productive life, one where you get to choose what you do, where you work on things because you want to, not because you have to, where you can be generous with your time because time is the only thing you have left to give. Buffett has given away most of his fortune, not because he had to, not because someone made him, but because he decided that money sitting in a bank account doesn't do any good, that wealth is worthless unless it's used, that the scorecard of life isn't how much you accumulate, but what you do with what you've been given, That's a retirement philosophy. That's a life philosophy. The sixth lesson, that the habits that made you rich can make you poor if you're not careful. Buffett is famously frugal. He still lives in the house he bought in 1958 for $31,000. He drives a modest car. He doesn't wear expensive clothes. He eats breakfast at McDonald's. He's worth over $100 billion and lives like a man worth 100,000. That frugality served him well when he was building wealth. Every dollar he didn't spend was a dollar he could invest. Every unnecessary expense was a missed opportunity for compounding. Frugality was a virtue, a discipline, a source of pride. But he's also acknowledged that taken too far, frugality becomes stinginess, that there's a difference between being careful with money and being unable to enjoy it, that you can save so much for the future that you forget to live in the present. He's told stories about people he knew who saved their entire lives and then died before they could enjoy any of it. People who denied themselves trips and experiences and memories because they were always worried about money. People who reached the end and realized they'd sacrificed too much. That's a tragedy. Not a financial tragedy, a human tragedy. The balance is hard. On one hand, you can't spend recklessly in retirement. You can't blow through your savings in the first 5 years and then have nothing left. You can't pretend the money will last forever. It won't. But on the other hand, you can't hoard every dollar like it's the last dollar you'll ever have. You can't live in fear. You can't let the worry about running out prevent you from actually living. Buffett's advice? Know your number. Know how much you can safely spend each year. And then spend it. Not more, but not less either. If you've planned well, if you've been disciplined, if you've saved enough, then you've earned the right to enjoy it. Go on the trip, buy the thing, spend time with the people you love, because the money is only valuable if it gives you the life you want. And if you die with millions in the bank and a list of regrets, you didn't win. You lost. The seventh thing Buffett learned late, that health is the ultimate wealth. This seems obvious. Everyone knows health is important. But Buffett has said he didn't truly understand it until he was older, until he watched friends and colleagues get sick, until he saw brilliant minds trapped in failing bodies, until he realized that all the money in the world can't buy you another decade if your body gives out. He's talked about how he thinks of his body like a car. You only get one for your entire life. You can't trade it in. You can't upgrade. You can maintain it, or you can abuse it. But you're stuck with it. And if you wreck it when you're young, you pay the price when you're old. The problem is that when you're young, you feel invincible. You skip the doctor's appointments. You ignore the warning signs. You eat poorly and sleep badly and stress constantly because you're focused on building your career and your wealth and your future. And you tell yourself you'll take care of your health later, when you have more time, when you're less busy, when you retire. But by the time you retire, the damage is done, the habits are set, the consequences have arrived, and you spend your retirement managing conditions instead of enjoying life. Buffett didn't make that mistake, but he's watched enough people who did. He's seen wealthy people spend their retirement going from doctor to doctor, dealing with surgeries and medications and restrictions, missing out on trips because they're not healthy enough to travel, watching life from the sidelines because they didn't take care of themselves when it mattered. And he's realized that the best retirement investment you can make has nothing to do with your portfolio. It's exercise, it's sleep, it's nutrition, it's stress management, It's preventive care. It's the boring, unglamorous work of maintaining the machine that carries you through life. You can't compound your health the way you compound your wealth. But you can protect it. You can invest in it. You can treat it like the precious, irreplaceable asset it is. Because here's the truth. You can have $10 million in the bank, but if you're too sick to enjoy it, you're poor. You can have the perfect portfolio, but if you don't have the energy to do the things you love, you've failed. Money is worthless without health. Retirement is pointless without vitality. Take care of the body. The money will follow, or it won't. But at least you'll be alive to see it. The 8th lesson Buffett wished he'd internalized earlier, that family is the investment that actually matters. Buffett has been honest about his regrets as a father. He was consumed by his work. He spent decades focused on building Berkshire Hathaway. He missed moments. He was physically present, but mentally absent. He prioritized business over family in ways he wouldn't if he could do it over. And here's what he learned. You can rebuild a portfolio. You can recover from a market crash. You can make back money you lost on a bad investment. But you can't get back time with your kids. You can't redo your children's childhood. You can't repair relationships that broke because you were never there. This is the investment that compounds in reverse. Every moment you miss is gone forever. Every conversation you don't have is a conversation you'll never have. Every memory you don't make is a blank space that can't be filled later. Buffett has said that if he could give advice to his younger self, it would be to pay more attention to the people who mattered, to be present, to listen, to show up not just physically, but emotionally, to understand that the scoreboard that really matters isn't your net worth. It's whether the people you love know you love them. In retirement, this becomes even more important because time is the only thing you have left to give. You can't work more hours to make up for past mistakes. You can't buy back the years you lost. But you can be present now. You can be the grandparent who shows up, the spouse who listens, the friend who stays in touch, the person who makes the effort. Money can't do that. Only you can do that. And if you get to the end and your portfolio is perfect, but your relationships are broken, you've failed at the only thing that really mattered. The 9th lesson, that simplicity in lifestyle creates richness in experience. Buffett never lived large. He never needed the mansion or the yacht or the private island. He found richness in simple pleasures. Reading, talking with friends, playing bridge, working on problems he found interesting, living in a way that felt authentic to him. That's a model for retirement, because the happiest retirees aren't the ones with the most expensive hobbies. They're the ones who figured out what they actually enjoy, what brings them peace, what feels meaningful, and then they do more of that. It's not about deprivation, it's about clarity, about knowing the difference between what you think you should want and what you actually want, about building a life around the things that genuinely matter to you instead of the things that impress other people. For some people, that's travel. For others, it's gardening. For others, it's volunteering or writing or painting or spending time with grandkids. There's no right answer. The only wrong answer is living someone else's retirement because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Buffett's lifestyle gave him freedom. Freedom from the pressure to maintain appearances. Freedom from the burden of managing a complicated life. Freedom to focus on what he loved. That's the real luxury, not stuff, not status, but the ability to spend your time the way you want to spend it. And here's the beautiful part. That kind of retirement doesn't require a fortune. It requires clarity. It requires honesty about what you value. And it requires the courage to live differently than the people around you, if that's what feels right. The 10th and final lesson Buffett wishes he'd learned earlier. That time is the only asset you can't recover. This is the one that haunts him. Not because he wasted time. He didn't. He spent his life doing what he loved. But because he's watched so many other people waste it. People who spent years in jobs they hated, telling themselves they'd quit once they had enough. People who postponed joy, postponed adventure, postponed life, always waiting for some future moment that never came. And then they got sick, or someone they loved got sick, or time just ran out, and all the planning and saving and optimizing didn't matter because the moment had passed. Buffett is in his 90s now. He's still working, still investing, still writing his annual letters, still doing what he loves. But he's acutely aware that time is finite, that every year is precious, that the game isn't about accumulating more wealth. It's about making the years you have left count. For retirees, this is the ultimate wisdom. You've already done the hard part. You've worked, you've saved, you've built something. Now the question is, what are you going to do with the time you have left? Because you can't take the money with you. You can't spend it when you're gone. The only thing that matters is what you do with it now, today, this year, before it's too late. That doesn't mean being reckless. It doesn't mean abandoning your plan or spending every dollar. But it means understanding that the purpose of money in retirement isn't to have more money. It's to have more life, more experiences, more memories, more meaning, more time with people you love, more of whatever it is that makes you feel alive. And if your financial plan doesn't support that, then your financial plan is wrong. Buffett has given away tens of billions of dollars, not because he has to, not because he's trying to buy his way into heaven, but because he realized that money has no value unless it's used. That wealth sitting in an account is just potential, that the joy is in the using, not the having. That's the final lesson, the one that takes a lifetime to learn. That money is not the point. It never was. It's a tool, a means, a way to create the life you want. But it's not the life itself. The life is in the moments, the conversations, the sunsets, the laughter, the quiet morning coffee, the time with grandkids, the books you read, the places you visit, the people you help, the mark you leave, the love you give and receive. That's what Warren Buffett wishes he'd fully understood at 60. That the numbers matter, but they're not what matters most. That discipline and patience and frugality are virtues, but only if they serve a larger purpose. That wealth is wonderful, but only if it gives you the freedom to live well, love well, and leave well. By the time you're 60, you've learned most of life's lessons the hard way. You've made mistakes. You've had successes. You've seen friends rise and fall. You've watched the market soar and crash and soar again. You've felt the fear and the greed and the regret and the joy, and if you've paid attention, you've figured out what matters. Warren Buffett figured it out. Not perfectly, not without regrets, but well enough to build not just a fortune, but a philosophy, a way of thinking about money that serves life instead of consuming it, a framework that works in good times and bad times, a set of principles that let you sleep at night and wake up grateful. And that's the legacy he wants to leave, not the billions, not the returns, not the records, but the wisdom, the understanding that money is simple if you let it be simple, that retirement is beautiful if you plan for it honestly, that life is short and precious and finite, and the only unforgivable mistake is wasting it. So here's the wisdom he'd give his 60-year-old self if he could go back. Stop worrying so much. You have enough. You've always had enough. The margin of safety is there. The plan is sound. The fear is just noise. What you need now isn't more wealth. It's more presence, more gratitude, more awareness that this moment right now is the only moment you have. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Live simply. Invest patiently. Love fully. Give generously. And understand that the goal was never to die rich. The goal was to live rich, to experience richness, to feel richness, to create richness in the lives of others. And if you do that, if you really do that, then the money part takes care of itself. Because in the end, the wealthiest people aren't the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones with the fewest regrets, the ones who spent their time wisely, who loved well, who lived fully, who understood that the real compounding isn't in the bank account. It's in the relationships, the experiences, the memories, the meaning. That's what Warren Buffett learned. That's what he wishes he'd known sooner. And that's what he'd want every retiree to understand. You've earned this time. You've worked for it. You've sacrificed for it. Now don't waste it chasing numbers that don't matter. Chase life. Chase joy. Chase peace. Chase the moments that make you feel alive. Because that's the only investment that really pays off. That's the only return that actually matters. That's the only wealth worth having. And when you get to the end, when you look back on the years you've been given, you won't remember your portfolio balance. You won't remember your returns. You'll remember how it felt, who you loved, what you built, how you gave, whether you lived with courage and grace and gratitude. That's the final accounting. That's the only scorecard that counts. Warren Buffett knows that now. He wishes he'd known it sooner, but he knows it now. And so should you. The simplest rule in investing is also the simplest rule in life. Don't lose what matters. Protect it. Cherish it. Use it well. And when your time comes, leave knowing you didn't waste a single precious moment of the gift you were given. That's retirement wisdom. That's life wisdom. That's everything worth knowing.